Hello and welcome once again to the IR Current Affairs lecture series. We are covering the month of April. I talked about the first topic, that is the continuation of West Asia crisis in the first lecture. Let us now discuss the next topic. Very important development considering the kind of escalation that we are witnessing in terms of conflicts in different parts of the world. Nuclear non-proliferation treaty. There is a review conference of NPT, and we are going to discuss different dimensions in an in-depth manner as far as NPT review conference is concerned. So 2026 NPT review conference. Every aspect we would cover as far as this topic is concerned. This is a very important topic considering the increasing nuclear threat, and for UPSC, global concerns are very much part of the syllabus. And one global concern is the nuclear warfare. Right? Let us talk about 2026 NPT review conference. Right? So 2026 review conference of the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons (NPT) is a major global diplomatic event. And this being major global diplomatic event, we must be prepared for a question on this topic, right? Where member states assess the implementation of treaties objectives. So member states are trying to assess different provisions and how these provisions are being implemented as far as the treaty is concerned, right? These conferences are held every 5 years under framework of United Nations. So every 5 years, a review is done to what extent we are able to implement uh, 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 the objectives of treaty. This year's review conference becomes all the more important because of the crumbling non-proliferation architecture. So is it in trouble? Is it collapsing? The answer is sort of yes. And what that context is exactly, we would discuss that in this lecture, right? Let us first talk about a brief understanding of the background context of 2026 conference, background context, right? The 2026 conference takes place in a highly polarized geopolitical environment shaped by different events. What are those? Breakdown of the previous arms control agreements. We will talk about this because it has been mentioned here. I have discussed that in the upcoming content, right? So, no doubt, previous arms control agreements are breaking down. That is one context. Second, rising tensions among nuclear powers. You talk about US Russia tensions, you talk about China's nuclear expansion, West Asian instability, which is the ongoing conflict. So, in this context, we are witnessing rising tensions among nuclear powers. In the first lecture of this month as well, I talked about the talks between Putin and Trump and how they are warning each other. I talked about the upcoming, mentioned rather, the upcoming Trump Xi Jinping summit, which is going to have a sort of hot discussion on Taiwan, maybe, and that would show us the kind of tension that is brewing between these two countries, right? That is another context. Number four, failure of 2022 NPT review conference to adopt consensus final document. So global consensus is difficult to forge. We know that. We know that it is difficult even in case of environmental issues, right? Similar kind of thing can be seen here as well. So it's difficult to come up with consensus on anything. So final document was not released as part of 2022 NPT review conference 5 years back. Now, can we see something coming up in terms of final document? We have to wait for it, right? Thus, 2026 conference is considered crucial for restoring credibility to the global nuclear non-proliferation regime. PSI students, you have to pay attention to this. So, global nuclear non-proliferation regime. What does it consist of? It consists of NPT. It consists of IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. I'm giving you another clue here for GS as well as PSIR. There's a topic for both as far as IR is concerned. That is international organizations in the news. So because of this, IAEA is in the news, and a grouping would come in the news. That is Nuclear Suppliers Group, right? So non-proliferation regime consists of these three things: IAEA as an institution, Nuclear Suppliers Group as a group, and this agreement NPT, right? That is nuclear non-proliferation regime, and its credibility is being questioned by recent developments that we briefly talked about, and in that context, this conference is coming up, right? What are the key issues on agenda as far as this conference is concerned? First one, obviously, nuclear disarmament, right? So demand for time-bound disarmament commitments by NWS. In my regular IR lectures, also I use this abbreviation NWS, NNWS. NWS are nuclear weapon states, and NNWS are nuclear non-weapon states. Please understand, NWS are five. Formally recognized NWS are five. That is the five permanent members of UNSC: US, Russia, UK, France, and China. But other countries have also developed nuclear weapons like India and Pakistan. Right? They are technically under NPT, NNWS, but we know in reality they are NWS, nuclear weapon states. Right? So time-bound disarmament commitments by nuclear weapon states. There's a demand for this. There are concerns over modernization of nuclear arsenal and lack of progress under Article 6 of the NPT regarding nuclear disarmament. There is scanty progress, almost no progress, and nuclear arsenals are getting more and more advanced versions. That they're getting that more and more advanced avatar. So tactical nuclear weapons are now being talked about, and the conventional nuclear weapons had some kind of a deterrence, inherent deterrence, even with the person who possesses it. We should not use it. That is the kind of kind of a sort of restriction that comes with the destructive potential of the bombs, nuclear bombs. But nowadays, low intensity tactical nuclear weapons have been created, and that's a cause of concern. So this is one agenda to be discussed on 2026 NPT Review Conference. Second, nuclear non-proliferation. Focus on preventing new states from acquiring nuclear weapons. That is a major concern. So, one is disarmament that deals with vertical proliferation. Proliferation means spread of the nuclear weapons, right? Vertical proliferation is when a particular country has already got some nuclear weapons, it is increasing its stockpile. It is increasing its stockpile. This is vertical proliferation. What is horizontal proliferation? More and more countries acquiring nuclear weapons. That is called horizontal proliferation. Right. Second point is about horizontal proliferation. More and more countries acquiring nuclear weapons. That has to be prevented, right? So focus on preventing new states from acquiring nuclear weapons. Major concern, Iran's nuclear program right now. So all these things are interlinked, and that's why we have to understand that this is an important context for this conference. Iran issue is an important context for this conference. Role of safeguards under International Atomic Energy Agency. I told you this organization is in news. I have talked about International Energy Agency as a special topic in last month, and now International Atomic Energy Agency becomes an important organization in the news, right? Peaceful uses of nuclear energy is the third topic on the agenda for this conference, right? Promotion of nuclear energy for energy security and climate change mitigation. It's comparatively clean fuel. We can reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, and thereby the GHG emissions can be reduced, and that can help the cause of climate change, right? Okay. Secondly, without compromising on energy needs, we can ensure energy security, right? Debate over technology access versus non-proliferation restrictions, and this is an old debate, very old debate, right? Technology access is problematic in case of nuclear technology because it's a dual-edged sword. It's a dual-edged, two-edged sword, right? If you give technology to somebody, and that somebody may use it for civilian purposes, peaceful, may use it for military purposes, and that's why technology access comes with this concern: how to prevent proliferation. So that debate is still there, and this debate will happen in this conference as well. Then number four, agenda number four, nuclear risk reduction. It calls for no first use policies to be adopted by all countries. India already has it, you know it very well, right? Then de-alerting nuclear weapons. We have to de-alert nuclear weapons, right? Then transparency and confidence building measures. These three things would reduce the nuclear escalation. India already has these things in its nuclear policy. So this would be a sort of a call by different countries as far as this conference is concerned. Agenda number five, nuclear weapon free zones, NWFZ, right? Strengthening existing zones, right? Those areas of the world which don't have nuclear weapons, those are to be consolidated, strengthened, and proposal for Middle East nuclear weapon free zone. Middle East right now is on the brink of acquiring nuclear weapons through Iran. So that has to be prevented. And we have to maintain Middle East as nuclear weapon free zone. That could be one topic of discussion on the agenda for this conference, right? Okay. So this is a, sort of an update of what is coming as far as this NPT review conference is concerned. Now, let us try and understand detailed analysis by Harsh Pant. So this was sort of factual information about the review conference, right? But for the mains, that is not sufficient. It could be sufficient for prelims, right? To answer MCQs. For mains, you need deeper analysis, and that deeper analysis is provided by Harsh Pant. Let's try and understand detailed deeper analysis by Harsh Pant. In his analysis, Harsh Pant argues that the global nuclear order is currently at a critical turning point. There is no doubt about that. Then, as to what it makes it critical turning point, we'll go through it. 2026 Review Conference is not merely a routine diplomatic event, but a decisive moment to evaluate whether international community can prevent a slide into nuclear disorder. Harsh Pant is clearly giving a warning. He is, telling us that if we don't act now, right, this conference is offering a decisive movement to act and to restore the credibility of nuclear non-proliferation region. Else, we slide into nuclear disorder. That is what Harsh Pant is warning, right? Post-Cold War system, which was once based on restraint, arms control, and predictability. 1990 was a decade which started with what George Bush Senior, right, talked about new world order. That would be liberal, that would be peaceful, regard for human rights, etc., etc., etc. So initially, the post-Cold War system began with this restraint, arms control, and predictability. But now it is being replaced by fragmented competitive nuclear landscape. It is fragmented, टुकड़ों में बट गया, right? And very much competitive kind of nuclear landscape. So North Korea jumping in, Iran jumping in, other countries trying to prevent them from acquiring nuclear weapons is something that we're witnessing, right? So competitive nuclear landscape is emerging. Could be a symptom of multipolar world that John Mearsheimer show, enthusiastically talked about. This is going to be a threat, the tragedy of great powers, right? Changing nature of global nuclear order. So what is changing? How the landscape is changing, right? Pant highlights that the earlier nuclear order was characterized by gradual disarmament, at least, strong normative commitments. What are the normative commitments? No first use, a commitment to peaceful use of nuclear energy, right? Bilateral arms control agreements. So all these were highlights of earlier nuclear order, right? At least between major powers, right? However, the current phase is marked by increased geopolitical competition, weakening institutional frameworks, and technological disruption. We are witnessing all these things, and that has made this entire landscape, not just nuclear, but geopolitical landscape, a volatile one, right? So, geopolitical competition is there, weakening of institutional frameworks across the spectrum. You talk about WTO, you talk about WHO during COVID-19 pandemic, you talk about environmental platforms, you talk about UNO, you talk about UNSC. All the institutional frameworks are weakening right now, and so is the case with nuclear platforms as well, right? Third and most important thing is technological disruption. Now, what has happened? The modern cutting edge technology, especially in the field of ICT, would be combined with nuclear weapons. Imagine artificial intelligence plus nuclear weapons. That would be a potent force, potent threat, I would say, not just force. And that's why Harsh Pant rightly highlights the kind of consequences technological disruption is going to cause combined with nuclear weapons. Although the global number of nuclear warheads has declined to around 12,000, this numerical reduction conceals deeper transformation. I have talked about this even in my regular IR lectures, that if I have 10 nuclear bombs of say x potential, and if I reduce them to 5 with each 2x potential, the number of warhead has reduced, but not the destructive potential. So reduction in the number conceals deeper transformation, right? The importance of nuclear weapons in strategic calculations is increasing and indicating a shift from quantitative reduction to the qualitative enhancement. That is what I was talking about. I have 10 weapons with X destructive potential. I reduce them to 5. but with the same potential, because every weapon has got now 2x potential. So what has happened? Quantitative reduction, but qualitative enhancement. And that has got a major role to play in deterrence. Increasingly, in the pressure tactics, nuclear weapons are being used in terms of deterrence, nuclear deterrence, I would say, right? So, deeper transformation gets concealed if we only focus on number, right? Modernization of nuclear arsenals, that is another important dimension highlighted by Harsh Pant, right? A key feature of the present nuclear order is widespread modernization of nuclear arsenals. Nuclear weapons, nuclear arsenals are getting modernized. Newer and newer dimensions are being added, right? All nine nuclear armed states are actively upgrading their nuclear capabilities rather than moving towards disarmament. And any kind of disarmament they portray, they show, is rather outdated weapons being eliminated. So if I have manufactured a nuclear bomb, say in 50s as US or USSR, right? And in 2026, I'm saying that I'm removing 5 bombs. Those are anyway outdated, right? So that kind of nuclear disarmament is being showed off by major powers. But on the other hand, they are very much into upgrading their nuclear capabilities, right? China's rapid nuclear expansion reflects growing strategic ambitions and shift away from earlier minimal deterrence posture. Gone are the days of minimum deterrence potential, right? So nobody's talking about minimum deterrence these days. It's more about increasing your ability, nuclear ability. Everyone is into it. China is rapidly increasing its nuclear ability. At the same time, United States and Russia continue to dominate in terms of nuclear stockpiles, but are also engaged in comprehensive modernization programs involving all those things: delivery systems, warheads, command and control systems, which are now integrated with AI and different other advanced technologies. Other nuclear powers are also enhancing their capabilities, not just China, US, and Russia, right? Other nuclear powers are also enhancing their capabilities, making nuclear competition more widespread, no longer limited to major powers alone, and more intense as well. So that is an important context in which this conference is taking place. In this analysis, Harsh Pant is continuously highlighting the impact of emergent technology. Let us talk about that. So this is the topic we are covering: impact of emerging technologies. Harsh Pant emphasizes that emerging technologies are significantly altering the dynamics of nuclear stability. No doubt about that. Emerging technologies are giving a different kind of orientation to all the arms, including nuclear arms, right? Introduction of hypersonic weapons, cyber threats to nuclear command systems. Imagine this: a nuclear country's nuclear command system hacked by a sort of irresponsible actor, and that would wreak havoc in the world. So these are the kind of new threat that we're witnessing when nuclear ability, nuclear weapons are wedded to the cutting edge technology, right? See, cyber threats to nuclear command system, that is something unthinkable, right? If it happens, right? And the integration of artificial intelligence are compressing decision making timelines. You can rapidly take decisions with AI these days, right? This technological evolution is blurring the distinction between nuclear and conventional domains. So far, the world has maintained this. So far, the world has maintained this. Let's have nuclear domain differentiate from conventional domain. Even if war is happening here, even nuclear powers don't drag it into this domain. Somehow that has been maintained, but now the distinction is getting blurred, and that's a dangerous situation for the entire world. Nuclear weapons are increasingly integrated with cyber, space, and conventional military capabilities. Right? So, conventional military capabilities, for example, missile system, and now with missile system with nuclear warheads. Example, right? Space technology used in nuclear attacks. Right? Cyber threats into nuclear command system. So these are the potential areas which are quite threatening to the global security, thereby increasing the risk of miscalculation, unintended escalation. So what if my nuclear command is being hacked? That makes me quite skeptical about the other power, and I may miscalculate. The other power may not be interested in the war, but I may think that it is interested in the war. That increases the risk of miscalculation and unintended escalation. Both were not intending escalation, but it may happen because of these technological disruptions. Collapse of arms control frameworks. One of the most concerning developments is weakening of global arms control regimes. So what we are witnessing is global arms control regimes are being weakened because of the new developments in the nuclear weapons and technology, for that matter, right? Now, that is another context. Expiration of the New START Treaty. There has been a long history of SALT 1, SALT 2, START Treaty, SORT Treaty, and then New START Treaty. This was the only live treaty. All other treaties are dead. That was putting some checks on Russia and US, right? So in February 2026, this treaty expired, and that is not being replaced. So that means this marks the end of legally binding limits on the nuclear arsenals between US and Russia. For the first time in decades, ever since that SALT 1 was signed in 1971, right? There have been treaties to replace the earlier treaties, right? And continuously, these countries promised to reduce the nuclear warheads, and as a result of which, the number of nuclear warheads has reduced to 12,000. We mentioned that. That is because of what? SALT 1, SALT 2. SALT 2 was not implemented because of the Cold War tensions escalating again. But after Cold War, we have START Treaty, we have SORT Treaty, New START Treaty. All these treaties ensured that the warheads, nuclear warheads, reduced by United States and Russia. But now, with the end of the term of this treaty, there is no legally binding treaty anymore for these two countries, right? Pant argues that this is not just a technical lapse, but reflects deeper political breakdown in the global cooperation. See, if the situation would have been normal, if the conditions would have been normal, these two countries might have renewed this treaty, or might have come up with another treaty to replace this, to supersede this. But this has not happened. So it doesn't look like technical lapse, right? Technically, it expired and we did not pay attention. It's more about deeper political breakdown. They don't want any kind of limits on their nuclear capability now. That looks like a more possible kind of explanation as to why this treaty has expired without other treaties superseding the existing treaty. Additionally, pressures on agreements such as Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and broader NPT framework indicate fragility of the current nuclear governance system. So please understand, in the beginning we talked about crumbling breakdown of you know uh, the current governance or regime. Somewhere we have mentioned right here, breakdown of previous arms control agreements. I said we would discuss that. So this is what we discuss now. So what is the breakdown exactly? It's about New START treaty. It's about existing agreements coming in trouble, existing regime coming in trouble. So this explains the breakdown of the existing arms control frameworks, right? Regional proliferation risks. At the regional level, nuclear risks are intensifying. There's no doubt about it. You talk about Korean Peninsula, you talk about West Asia. So North Korea continues to expand its nuclear capabilities, while Iran remains a critical uncertainty in West Asia. And that is one reason as to why we are seeing that war happening in the West Asia. And this could be one major topic to be discussed in the 2026 NPT conference, review conference. Harsh Pant warns of possibility of proliferation cascades. So once one country acquires nuclear weapons, the surrounding countries start looking for nuclear weapons. So that is called cascading effect, proliferation cascade by Harsh Pant. In regions such as Middle East and East Asia, where multiple states may seek nuclear capabilities in response to other countries acquiring it, and that becoming threat for these countries. Changing geopolitical alignments also raise concerns about spread of sensitive technologies, which could accelerate both vertical and horizontal proliferation. I have talked about this. What is vertical proliferation? What is horizontal proliferation? Changing geopolitical alignments raise concerns about spread of sensitive technologies, which may again give rise to what? Both vertical proliferation and horizontal proliferation. Another important dimension is shift in nuclear doctrines. Nuclear doctrines, nuclear सिद्धांत बदल रहे हैं. Nuclear doctrines are changing, right? Harsh Pant observes a significant transformation in how nuclear weapons are perceived and used. There has been a transformation. You cannot really ignore it, right? Somehow different countries are adopting different nuclear postures. उनके सिद्धांत बदल रहे हैं. Their doctrines are changing, right? Traditionally क्या था? What was the doctrine traditionally? Traditionally considered weapons of last resort. This was the doctrine, right? Now, nuclear weapons are increasingly integrated into broader studies of coercive statecraft. So, in the coercive statecraft, now nuclear element is quite visible. Open threats, nuclear threats, something that we saw when Trump talked about sending Iran to the Stone Age, right? So we need to understand this. Now it has been increasingly used that difference between conventional domain and nuclear domain is getting blurred, right? States are using nuclear signaling alongside conventional cyber and space capabilities, clear cut nuclear signals. So if you don't listen to us, we would nuke you, kind of thing, right? That language that we saw from Donald Trump. This has made deterrence more dynamic, but also more uncertain. Deterrence has become dynamic, no doubt about that. Right? What is deterrence? To prevent somebody from doing something through fear of a threat. Merely the fear should work. That is deterrence, right? So deterrence has become dynamic with all the elements coming in. That is nuclear, conventional, cyber, space, right? But it becomes more uncertain, and more uncertain the deterrence, more is the chance of escalation, right? So it can lead to escalation in terms of conflict, right? Rise of tactical nuclear weapons. That is another point we mentioned while we started this deeper analysis, right? Growing emphasis on tactical or low yield nuclear weapons is another disturbing trend, important trend, right? We need to understand the earlier weapons were massive weapons, and there was at least some kind of moral restriction. We should not wreak such kind of havoc. But if I can use nuclear weapons with a targeted kind of destruction that incentivizes use of nuclear weapons, right? And that's the concern as far as this conference is concerned. Countries like Russia have increased reliance on such weapons to counter conventional disadvantages, while the United States is exploring flexible response actions. In conventional weapons, Russia cannot match US. Russia is a match in nuclear capability, and that's why Russia is trying to use tactical nuclear weapons in order to compensate for their conventional disadvantages, right? And US is trying to look for response options, and that creates arms race of the different kind of tactical weapons, right? Similarly, Pakistan's development of short-range nuclear weapons reflects an attempt to deter limited conventional conflicts. In limited conventional conflicts, Pakistan is no match to India. So their answer to this is short-range nuclear weapons that would create a deterrence for conventional conflicts, right? However, Pant cautions that idea of limited nuclear use introduces dangerous ambiguities and increases likelihood of escalation during crisis. It looks like a plausible option. I'm not wreaking a lot of havoc, but I'm meeting my objectives through tactical nuclear weapons. This seems good in terms of military strategy in a drawing board. But the moment you go into the war, in the heat of the situation, it may as well escalate into actual use of massive bombs. So that is a cause of concern, according to Harsh Pant, right? Another aspect, erosion of nuclear taboo, right? Pant highlights increasing normalization of nuclear rhetoric. Nuclear rhetoric is no more a taboo. It has become a normal kind of thing, right? It has been normalized. Nuclear threats and signaling are becoming more frequent, which weakens the long-standing nuclear taboo that has prevented use of nuclear weapons since 1945. There's no doubt about that. What has happened is uh, uh, after 45, using the word nuclear was a taboo, right? Uh, 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 Nina Tandelbad has talked about this, that it became a taboo. But nowadays it became normal. You can use that word. You can pressurize a country through nuclear deterrence. You can threaten them in terms of complete destruction through nuclear weapons. And we saw that in case of the Iran war. Although the taboo has not completely collapsed, the erosion is evident, right? Nuclear weapons as tools of coercion are openly being used these days. So there is erosion of nuclear taboo these days, right? This trend raises the risk of both deliberate and accidental nuclear escalation. Both deliberate escalation as well as accidental. Deliberate, you decide to use nuclear weapons directly, you start with tactical and then go into the full-fledged war. Even if you don't intend to go for the full-fledged nuclear war and you just want to achieve your objective with tactical short-range kind of nuclear weapons, it may as well escalate into actual nuclear war due to accident or in the heat of situation, right? So all these developments make this conference very significant, right? The kind of analysis Harsh Pant has provided has been comprehensive, and we get all the points as to why this conference becomes important, right? So you can add this content to different kind of questions. The analysis that we discussed, right? I have given you a couple of questions to answer as part of the practice. Significance of 2026 NPT review conference. In this context, the context that we talked about, the different kind of threats that we're witnessing to the world, this conference assumes critical importance. No doubt about that. आप ये देख लो, you just look at what all things we have discussed and how dangerous those things are, right? So in this context, this review conference becomes very, very important, critically important, right? Harsh Pant argues that it will act as a litmus test to determine whether the global community can manage or reverse the trend towards nuclear disorder. Harsh Pant has highlighted that we are heading towards nuclear disorder. This slide into nuclear disorder can be prevented by this conference, and we have to wait for it, whether it can do so or not. So that would be a litmus test for this conference. The challenge lies not only in reviving existing frameworks, but also in reimagining new governance mechanisms suitable for multipolar and technologically complex world. So these are two dimensions which are, I would say, the new dimensions of contemporary world order. The contemporary world order is different. See, there has been a lot of talk about new world order since end of Cold War. But after 3 decades of post-Cold War era, we have to understand that there have been new dimensions acquired by the world order. And if we talk about two prominent dimensions of the world order currently in the contemporary times, that is the multipolarity, which is bringing more and more instability, as John Mearsheimer analyzed it. And the other dimension, very disruptive one, technologically complex kind of world because of new technologies. So cyber, space, nuclear, artificial intelligence, all these technologies are merging, getting interconnected, and creating a lot of destructive potential, right? So that is something that the new governance system has to take into consideration. So strengthening, reviving existing frameworks, and reimagining new governance based on these new changes. Let us conclude the entire discussion. In conclusion, Harsh Pant argues that global nuclear order is moving towards a multipolar system marked by all these things, which are characteristic of a multipolar world order: competition, uncertainty, weakened institutional control, right? And in this context, this needs to be strengthened, reimagined, right? The growing centrality of nuclear weapons in the international politics poses significant risks to the global security. So nuclear taboo is getting eroded. Nuclear talk has been more open. The distinction between conventional nuclear is getting blurred. So all these things pose significant risks to the global security. Success of this review conference will depend on the ability of states to rebuild trust, strengthen institutions, and adapt to emerging challenges. So litmus test is this. This conference will pass the litmus test if it can build the trust among the states, if it can strengthen the institutions, and more importantly, institutions could be designed in such a manner that they can adapt to the emerging challenges, right? Without such efforts, the world may witness a renewed prominence of nuclear weapons with serious consequences for international peace and stability. So that's the concluding remark, right? As far as review conference is concerned of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. I have added a couple of questions for you to practice. For example, global nuclear order is shifting from stability to disorder. Discuss. So such kind of question may come in GS paper as well, because global concerns is very much part of your syllabus in GS. Then in the context of 2026 NPT review conference, analyze challenges facing global nuclear order. That could be another current based question, and I have given the model answers for that. You can practice it, compare that with these model answers to understand your progress. All right, so I conclude the discussion on this topic. This was the second topic of the month of April 2026, that is the review conference of Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. All right, let us stop here, and I would come up with another lecture with another topic of the month of April. Thank you.
For entire course, visit courses.neocivils.com.